In the last week, I have seen a bunch of videos, primarily by Press A and the backlogs, about beating Pikmin with a single type. Now these videos are awesome, but they utilize glitches and unintended behavior while doing so. This makes a lot of sense, considering it's literally impossible to beat the game otherwise. Still, this always left me wondering when watching these types of videos, but what if you did play the game as intended with only a single type? How many ship cards can you actually get? Today we will test this question, as we run through Pikmin 1 with only reds, only blues and only yellow Pikmin. Which of the three will get the most parts? Put your guesses in the comments below. Now the first day for all three types we just do normally. While technically we are using reds, we are doing nothing that the other types couldn't do. Now considering that they are the Pikmin that we start with, we begin with a red only run. We start the day like normal, killing enemies and bolstering our numbers. But as I broke down the wall leading to the yellow Pikmin, I quickly realized something. Without glitches, there is absolutely no way to reach most of the treasures in this area. We cannot break these walls in any way without yellow Pikmin. This means we'll have to make do with the amount of treasures we can get in the very restricted starting area. These include the Eternal Fuel Dynamo, the Shock Absorber, and through a trick to let red Pikmin get to this island, the Sagittarius as well. Annoyingly though, this only puts us at 3 treasures, while 4 are required for us to get to the next area and collect more treasures elsewhere. Annoyingly, Nintendo perfectly created this situation where progressing without yellows is completely impossible. So, with a grand total of 4 treasures, Olimar has no chance on the red Pikmin only run. Going to any other area is impossible with only 4 treasures, so I'm sorry red Pikmin, it's over. Now next up, I launched into the blue Pikmin run. The tutorial day is still done by the reds, but on day 2 we use a cheat code to gain access to the forest navel. Doing nothing here except getting the blues, getting a couple pellets in the area so I don't have to break down a wall with 1 Pikmin tomorrow, and then we leave again. Beware that even though we use cheats to unlock all areas for this, we will still act as though we need 5 treasures to move on to the forest navel for real. With that, let's land in the Forest of Hope. Now while initially I was very optimistic about the blues, as their ability to thread water should unlock a lot of areas, I soon realized that my optimism was misplaced. We break down the wall and get the Eternal Fuel Dynamo, followed up by the Shock Absorber and the Sagittarius, both of which are slightly easier with the reds. But then I once again realized that we are stuck. Without breaking any of the bomb walls, we cannot get the 5 treasures required, and in the starting area too, we need bombs to get to the final treasure. Sadly, the blues have done no better than the reds have. Or, so I thought. While recording the initial audio for this video, I decided to theory craft something. I used a cheat code to get infinite blue Pikmin. Sorry, but I didn't feel like grinding for half an hour for something I wasn't sure would work, and then walked up to the Snagret. Initially, I was just testing if I could even damage it. Hence the intense speed up that wasn't added in post, this was actually how I was playing it. So I noticed, hey, I can damage it. That's interesting. So I continued on with the most annoying boss fight that I have ever fought, until, eventually, the Snagret was defeated. After some annoying maneuvers, I got his part, which the blues could transport through this water to the ship. This is also why the reds cannot replicate the same trick, as they cannot go through the water and they cannot go through the bomb gate. But with this, it seems like the blue Pikmin do have a run after all. Despite me doing this with a cheat to get more blues, you can easily do this legitimately by just traveling to the impact site to get a bunch more Pikmin. And I can already spoil to you that the 30-day limit is never an issue in this run. So with that, let's now move on to the forest navel for real with the blue Pikmin. Now this new area is designated for the blues, as they are the types we unlock here. Still, we need to get at least 7 treasures if we want to unlock the distant spring, which might be pretty tough. We start off by collecting the space float, the automatic gear, and the number 1 Ionian jet. 3 treasures close to base, which we can get with little issue. But then we move on to the much more hostile rest of the map. We spend a bit of time clearing out the fire enemies in the area, collecting the gravity jumper without issue, after which we defeat the puffstool and maneuver the Omega stabilizer across a couple of fire hazards. Before the day ends, we reach into the water to get the anti-dioxin filter and spend the rest of the day bullying this wall. Now day 6 we move back into the forest navel, where we notice the beady longlegs is completely inaccessible without yellow Pikmin, and so is the Libra. This leaves one final treasure to collect, the analog computer, which we have to navigate through this narrow fire path, which luckily we do without any issues. Yikes. But once we collect it, we luckily have 12 treasures, exactly enough to move on to the distant spring, our final area. This area is very much filled with water, so playing through it with just water Pikmin is little different to a normal playthrough, give or take 15 yellow Pikmin. So we start today by easily collecting the repair type bolt and the massage machine, defeating the blowhawk for the interstellar radio as well, before building a bridge and getting the gluon drive. From here though, I started to get worried. Technically, a lot of these parts should be accessible to the blues, but Pikmin in this game are stupid, especially the blue ones. While they can transport parts over water, this doesn't mean that they actually do. The existence of these two walls, which I cannot knock down, very much concern me, as I fear that parts will just get stuck there rather than move around it, even though they can. So, on day 8, I start by destroying all walls that I can find, even the optional ones, hoping that they make the Pikmin choose better routes, but sadly, no. The bowsprit from the armored cannon beetle is transported to this bomb wall and therefore gets stuck, while the nearby UV lamp is impossible to reach without yellows. Moving on, I try to get the Kronos reactor, but this too is impossible without yellows. Now interestingly, the yellow flower didn't even spawn because I haven't unlocked their onion yet. Now while we can reach the number 2 Ionian jet, it annoyingly also takes the route that gets it stuck at the wall near the base. The final 2 treasures, the zirconium rotor and the pilot seat, should very much be retrievable by the blues, but because of simple, dumb routing, day 2 gets stuck on this other wall, ending that effort. This ends day 8 with only 4 treasures in the distant spring. Now combining that with the 7 that we got in the forest navel, and the 4 in the Forest of Hope, and the engine in the impact site, we have 16 parts in total. The question is now, can the yellows do any better? As we start a yellow Pikmin run and enter the Forest of Hope, all we do with the red Pikmin is knock down the 2 gates that separate us from the yellow Pikmin. This is not something that the yellows wouldn't be able to do, so it's fine. After this, I park the red Pikmin and we'll never see them again. Now the yellow Pikmin are amazing, as they can carry bomb rocks, which is extremely useful while fighting enemies, as long as you don't mess it up, and obviously for destroying the gates that have been the bane of our existence so far. This allows the yellows to do a far better job in the Forest of Hope than the other types. Still, on day 2, I took it slow, just bolstering the yellows' numbers and getting the Eternal Fuel Dynamo before blasting some walls open. Importantly, this wall is supposed to be destroyed only by blues, but with careful bomb throwing, the yellows can open it too, allowing yellow access to yet another treasure tomorrow. On day 3 though, we can really get going. The Forest of Hope was made for the yellows, and we can get every treasure in here with them. We start with getting some more Pikmin, which I then immediately lose by messing up the Sagittarius tech. We blow up some more walls and we get the Geiger counter from the Snagret. We move on to the extraordinary bolt after embarrassingly forgetting that this Bulborb exists, losing a bunch of Pikmin there as well, after which we also collect the whimsical radar. Must admit, not really proud at my performance here, but we're ready to get the remaining treasures tomorrow. Before we get to that though, I decided to get back to the impact site. Initially, I had some hopes of collecting the second part here, as technically, the yellows are able to damage and defeat the enemy holding it. But I soon realized that this would be pointless, as just defeating the enemy isn't enough, as the yellows can't transport it through the water. Oops. So I just used the day as a Pikmin collecting day, as I haven't been playing very carefully, ending the day with 193 yellows, hopefully enough for the rest of the game. But as we enjoy this rest day, why don't you consider subscribing? I hope to release more of these types of videos and others about Pikmin and other games, and would love to have you there. With that though, we can finish off the Forest of Hope, where on day 5 we should be able to get all the remaining treasures. We finally pick up the Sagittarius and the Shock Absorber with little issue, before moving on to the Nova Blaster and getting the Radiation Canopy with relatively little issues. Whoopsie. Now with that, we have completed the Forest of Hope completely with only yellow Pikmin, and we can move on to the Forest Navel. We only need to get 3 treasures here to unlock the Distant Spring as well, unlocking yet more treasures. So things are looking very good for the yellows. As we enter the Forest Navel, we get the space flows with little issue, as well as the automatic gear. That's it for the easy treasures though, as we now descend further into the fire-infested rest of the stage. Oh boy. We spent much of the day clearing out enemies, opening up shortcuts and destroying walls, as well as retrieving the gravity jumper. This means we have already collected enough treasures to unlock the Distant Spring. But the yellows aren't done. We knocked down a couple more walls, but tomorrow we shall continue the hunt for parts. After we land, we make our way to the Libra. Technically, you'd need water Pikmin to unlock this geyser, but if you just disband your Pikmin squad, the yellows will deal minor amounts of damage to it. Do this enough times, and the geyser will unlock, and you can get the Libra with just yellow Pikmin. Obviously though, the analog computer is stuck in the water, and we won't collect it. Just getting the Libra down technically isn't the worst part, as we now have to pass through a narrow fire corridor to get the treasure out. But luckily, we got this in the first cycle. Next up, we have a boss rush against the beady longlegs and the puffstool, neither of which are a big issue, after which we again maneuver their parts through the fire, luckily again without troubles. With that, we have collected the Omega Stabilizer and the Guard Satellite, putting us at 15 types already. The final parts in these areas, the number 1 Ionium Jet, the analog computer and the anti-dioxin filter, are 100% impossible to get without exploits, as they are fully submerged in water. Still, we have enough parts to leave the Forest Navel and check out the final area we can get to. Now worryingly, the Distant Spring is full of water, which might spell disaster for our yellows. We start the day by forcing the yellows through water to build this bridge, while clearing out enemies and building this second bridge. When the first bridge is done, we get the massage machine without issue and collect bombs. Though, annoyingly, we have just one short of destroying this very important wall. After a disastrous new amphibious maneuver, I start scouting the rest of the parts. This soon becomes very depressing. The pilot seat has to pass through water. The zirconium rotor is locked behind a small stream. The Ionium Jet and the Kronos reactor are locked behind a giant pool. On the other side of the map, this blowhawk holds the interstellar radio, which we obviously cannot get. Finally, while you can easily get yellow Pikmin on the repair type bolt, good luck getting it to base. So I end the day quite worried about how many treasures we can actually get here. On day 9, which I had hoped would be the final day, we start by destroying this gate and clearing out the area of bull bears without any issues. Or not. And then we collect the UV lamp. From there, we move on to the armored cannon beetle, who as a kid I assumed required reds to beat, but that's untrue. Yellows are more than capable of defeating the boss and gaining his treasure, the bowsprit. Sadly though, I once again messed up getting the yellows across this water, and this Wollywog was being the worst. So on day 10, we went back to this bridge, fixed it, and collected the gluon drive. We had no rush here, since this is the very final treasure we can collect in the game with just yellows. With that, we end the game with a total of 20 treasures collected, the complete maximum with only yellow Pikmin. So that concludes my little experiment. In the impact side, all 3 Pikmin would be able to collect the engine, but none of the types can collect the second part on their own. In the Forest of Hope, blues and reds are restricted to this area, with reds only getting 3 treasures, but the blues just clutching out 4, enough to get into the Forest Navel. The yellows are the star though, and can collect all treasures in this area. Moving on to the Forest Navel, these 3 treasures are inaccessible to the yellows, as they spawn completely submerged. Yet, all other treasures are gettable for them. Reds cannot reach this area, so they get no treasures here. The blues do struggle with the Libra and the guard satellite, but can collect all the other treasures with no trouble. Finally, in the distant spring, these treasures are submerged and thus impossible to collect without blues. While annoyingly, wall shenanigans mean that the blues, in return, cannot collect these 5 parts, while being unable to get the UV lamp due to not jumping high enough. But this feels wrong. We cannot just let the red Pikmin sit here and not test their abilities in the Forest Navel and the distant spring. Let's use this cheat code to unlock all areas again, just to theory craft how many treasures they could have gotten, had they gained access to these areas. Now, due to me being annoyed at not getting the final part, it seems that I only have 4 Pikmin left. So I first dive into the impact side to raise more again, quickly leaving again with a respectable 62 Pikmin under our command. Now as we enter the Forest Navel, we immediately notice a huge issue with the reds. They basically combine the weaknesses of the yellows and the blues while gaining nothing in return. Sure, they are immune to the fire hazards here, but these fire hazards hasn't stopped the yellows or the blues in collecting any treasure. The enemies we can just kill, and the fire geysers we can just maneuver past. So before we begin, these 3 parts, which are underwater, the reds cannot get. The Libra, much like the blues, red cannot get as they cannot jump high enough, while the guard satellite requires yellow to open up the bomb wall in front of it. This leaves very little parts left for the reds to collect. We start with the automatic gear and the space float, but after this, we technically still need 6 parts to officially unlock the distant spring, which you can already count should be impossible for them. Still, we push on. We defeat the puff stool, and oh boy, is it nice to just send the parts away without worrying about the fire hazards. We retrieve the Omega Stabilizer and the Gravity Jumper without any issue, but that's all we can do in the Forest Navel. Even after cheating to get here, the reds are once again stuck and technically cannot move on due to a lack of parts. Of course, we are still going to explore the final area just because, but still, it shows how poorly the reds fare in this challenge. Anyways, onto the distant spring. I think you can already guess how it goes, as we have the same issue as with the Forest Navel. Reds are combining the worst aspects of the yellows and the blues for the sake of this challenge. All of these treasures are already inaccessible due to not being able to enter water. The UV lamp is ungettable because reds don't jump high enough. The armored cannon beetle treasure is ungettable because we can't destroy the bomb walls and the treasure will get stuck. Without even starting the day, we are not getting more than 2 treasures with the reds here. So we start the day by forcing some reds to cross this water to build this bridge, before moving on to do it on the other side as well, proving without a shadow of a doubt that I have now fully mastered this trick without any issues. So yeah, due to a skill issue on my part, I failed to get either part this day, but coming back the next day, we easily collect both of the treasures which the reds can reach. And with that, we have our final scores. In the Forest Navel, we add the 4 treasures that the reds can get. And in the distant spring, the 2 which they get access to. With that, it's done. All 3 Pikmin types have ran through the main game, collecting as many treasures as possible. In third, we have the reds. Even with cheating, twice, they only got 10 treasures. Not even enough to officially unlock the third area. Second were the blues, gaining 16 parts, though it would have been 20 had they not been stopped by bad pathing in the distant spring. Then finally, the king of Pikmin 1, the yellow Pikmin, with an official score of 20 parts collected. Now, I had a lot of fun making this, and am considering doing this again for the other Pikmin games as well. Though, since they are far bigger and have far more Pikmin, I might do it area by area there. If you're interested in that, show your support by liking the video and leaving a comment. And with that, I have been a ranting Dutchman, and I hope to see you in the next one.